This is the I Love Success podcast. I'm Peter Jarboh, and I have made a vow to myself to help as many people as possible to achieve their dreams. Let's get started. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the I Love Success podcast. I am Peter Jarboh, the host. I just finished this amazing conversation with Edwin Ettinghausen. He's called the Running Jester and has the world record for most 100-mile finishes in a lifetime and also in 1 year, and a lot of other world records. We talked about running, life, about being a foster kid, about going after your dreams, and just being the person you're meant to be and being a person that is shining in this world. So never give up and watch this episode to learn more about that. So here we go. Welcome, Ed.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me here.
So let's have some fun. I'm curious, who is Ed really as a person?
You know, I'm just a regular guy who happened to find that I had a passion for running and kind of came onto it later in life and just found that it was something that fulfilled me, and I found that I can inspire others by doing it and have a lot of fun and break some records.
That's pretty cool. So we're gonna share your journey as a runner, but let's go a little bit further back. Can you talk about growing up? Where did you grow up, and how was life?
I grew up in foster care. I was removed from my mother's care at the age of 8 months old, as deemed by the court that she was unfit to care for me. She actually, not a fault of her own, she had mental illness. She was schizophrenic and bipolar. So because of that, she wasn't able to provide proper care. So I was placed in foster care, went through a number of foster homes, and eventually when I was 3.5, I came to a home that I stayed in. It was a stable home. It wasn't the most supportive home, you could say, but I had a place to sleep and food in my belly, and so that was my life. And as soon as I was able to kind of move out of that onto my own, I sort of took that opportunity and got married young and started living the American dream.
Cool. So was this in California or? I
was born in Sacramento, California. My mother moved to Las Vegas when I was a baby, and there's two stories, and I never have looked into to find if either of these, which one is true, if either one are true. But one story is that she dropped me off at the Salvation Army as a baby. Another one is that they found us in an abandoned car in the desert, and I had an ear infection, and that's when the courts got involved, determined that she was unfit. So Las Vegas was where I went into foster care, and eventually the family that I went into, they moved back to Northern California, which happened to be where they moved was within 30 miles of where I was actually born. Placerville, Northern California is near Sacramento. And so I grew up in Northern California, and eventually as an adult made my way down to Southern California.
Okay. And have you had any contact with your mom since this moment? Or?
The last contact I had with my mother, my foster parents wanted to adopt me, but they had to have permission from my mother until I was 12. And at the age of 12, then the courts can make that determination. And so the last I saw her, probably when I was 10, she came out to visit me, and I haven't been in touch with her. She was 39 when I was born. I'm 55, so I would expect that she's probably no longer alive. And I haven't been in touch with any of my blood relatives.
And how is that something that you have been thinking about in your life? How has that affected you as a person?
Not really. I have a curiosity, but I don't feel like I'm missing anything. I know for some people, they feel a hole in their lives that they've got to find their family. I don't really feel that need. If the opportunity came up, I would certainly take advantage of it, but I'm not going to go out of my way to find my blood relatives. I just don't feel I need that. I have a family now that fulfills me, and that's good enough.
And when you were a kid, did you in any way feel abandoned, or were you glad that you were in this foster care family? Have you thought about these things?
I have quite a bit. The family I grew up in, the parents my foster dad had been born in 1902, my foster mother in 1920. So they were definitely Depression era people. They believed in the spare the rod, spoil the child. So they were very disciplined, very strict. You could even say borderline abusive. In today's standards, it would certainly be abusive for sure. But back in past generations, that was just the way you raised a kid. You know, you slapped them, you spanked them, you did physical corporal punishment. So, but I knew that something growing up, it just didn't feel quite right. I didn't feel like this was really the way that someone should be raised, but I had no reference point. So when I went before the judge at 12 years old, at that point, my foster father, who had become my adopted father, was actually in an advanced stage of cancer, and actually he died within months after I was adopted. But there was a point where I went before the judge in chambers, and he said, "Now, this is your chance to tell me. You don't have to stay with this family if you don't want to. We will place you in another home, but this is it. Once you say yes, you will be adopted." And a part of me wanted to say, I don't want to live with this family any longer. But I didn't know anything, didn't have any point of reference, anything to compare to. Now looking back, it wasn't a good environment that I was raised in, but I didn't know that at the time. So I didn't really know what I was missing until I became an adult myself, had children of my own.
Yeah, it must be very difficult when you're 12 to make those kind of decisions. It's and the reason I want to talk about this is that there are many people in this world that are in foster care or adopted or feel lonely in their own family or feel different. So I think it's important that we talk about this, and also how, if you could talk to these kids now, what would you like to say? What did you learn from this experience?
I learned resilience and self-reliance, and in a way that may have hurt me because it took me a long time to get to a point in my adult life where I was willing to let people help me. I always felt that I couldn't really, and trust was a big issue too. To trust other people, it was hard for me to let people into my inner circle. I got married young at 19, and I've been married now for almost 36 years. And I have 4 adult children of my own and a grandchild. So my core family, that's not an issue but outside of my core family, that has been an issue. And running has actually helped me to deal with that as well, because I've made a lot of friends. I didn't have a whole lot of friends even as an adult. I pretty much kept to my business, kept to my family, myself, just because of that uneasiness of making that connection, that bond, and having that trust established. So what I would tell to kids, to answer your question, is you will find love if you have love in your heart, and if you do the right thing, and if you treat others well and right and loving, love's going to come into your life. If you're bitter, there's many people who wear their bitterness on their sleeve. They had a bad childhood, and so they use that as an excuse. I don't use my childhood as an excuse, because I actually have a good life now. And I wouldn't be the person I am today if I hadn't had to go through those hardships that were forced upon me. So I would have obviously preferred not to have gone through some of those things, but they helped make me who I am. So it's part of Ed. And so I would just tell kids, find your passion, be a good, kind person, be honest, and you'll find love. If you put love out there, love will come back to you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And is family important to you now?
Extremely important. That's the most important thing in my life.
Yeah. For me, family is very important too, and I think at the end of the day, family is everything we have, right? In
Yes.
one sense. And I like what you were saying, don't let the circumstances define you as a human being, because tell me one person that doesn't have problems.
Right.
It's just different layers, right?
That's true.
And
Yes.
how can we cope with that? How can we move forward from that? And I think community and sports are important for this, because it gives you a sense of belonging, right?
Yes.
And there's no one can, like when you finish a 100-mile race, no one can say you didn't do it, because it's right there, and no one can deny you, no matter how you look, what kind of clothes you wear, nothing. And that's why I like sports so much, because it's transparent in that way, right?
I like that about the marathon, even more specifically about the 100-mile event, is that It doesn't matter what your background is, what your financial position is. We all come there with the same goal, and what's going to make a difference is what effort you put in the training beforehand and the effort you put in during the event. But you can't buy your way to a 100-mile finish line. You can't bribe your way. You just have to put that hard work in, and we're all on an even playing field. We all come looking, well, I don't look the same as I wear a Jester outfit, but pretty much we all come in running clothes, so you can't tell anyone's status when they show up to the start line of a marathon, and I like that. It just evens the field.
Yeah, me too. And you're the guy that ran the most 100 miles in the world, right?
That is correct.
And that's pretty awesome.
It's a great feeling. What's really fun about that is when I broke that record was at a race called Badwater 135, which is 135 miles through Death Valley in the middle of July. I've now done that the last 7 years. I've been invited back again this year. It's limited to 100 people around the world are invited. So it's really an honor to be a part of that event. But when I did it this last year in 2017, the record had been 141 100-mile races. So that was my 142nd 100-mile race. Now what's cool about that was, of course, breaking the world record, but now every time I run a 100-mile race, I break another world record. It's my world record, but I keep breaking that world record and pushing it out further and further, and I'm going to keep doing that as long as I'm able to. So it's a great feeling knowing that just showing up, I just have to cross the finish line. I don't have to win it, I have to cross the finish line, and boom, another world record is broken.
That's pretty cool, and I think now you put yourself in that position, right? But I think that the mindset when you do something should be that it is a win, right? Even if you go to the gym, it's a win because you will end up hopefully a little bit better than before. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that I want to work a lot on, help people with progress, because maybe I am not the person that's going to do 150, 100 milers, but maybe I can start running a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Maybe I can become a little bit better person.
Well, two things on that. One is the word win. It really means a lot to me personally because I was born with the name Edwin. Middle initial was N, which is for Marion, which sounds like a girl's name, but John Wayne's name was actually Marion. I found that out later. His real name was Marion. So Edwin M. Richardson Jr. I was a junior, and then of course my name changed to Edwin William Ettinghausen when I was adopted. But I hated the name Edwin growing up because it was just an old-fashioned name, and kids would sometimes tease me, Edwina. I went mostly by Eddie growing up, but I hated Edwin. Ed was fine, Eddie was okay. But I've gotten to a point now to where I actually like the name because in my birthright, I'm made to win. My name is Ed Win. Yeah. So now I promote when I do my public speaking. ED stands for Extreme Dream, and so my byline is Extreme Dreamers Win, which is actually my name. So I love the word win by itself, but it has special meaning to me, and I've kind of grown into it. So now I'm actually proud of the name Edwin. When people ask me my name, I'll say Edwin with pride when I used to hate it in the past. As far as you mentioned about it's a win when you accomplish something, I feel anyone who puts forth an effort, has a goal, and completes it, that's a win. So when I run a 100-mile race, I actually don't finish and then go home. I stay until the very last one comes in because I've been there. I've won quite a few races, and I've been last a few times. And that's actually harder work. You talk to any 100-mile winner that can win a 100-mile race in, say, 15, 16, 17 hours, that's a good finish time. The last person might come in at 30 hours or 32 or 36, depending what the cutoff is. But to a person, the 100-mile winners will say, that was more work. What you did, staying out there on your feet for 30 hours, I couldn't do it. How do you even do it? And they truly mean that. So I celebrate the ones that come in, especially the very final finisher. That, to me, that's the winner, because the one who comes across the finish line at first, they get all the accolades, they get the first place prize, they get all the attention. But the one that sticks in there and just grinds it out just because for them it's a personal goal, a commitment that they're trying to finish, That is what impresses me. That's a winner.
I get goosebumps what you said right now, because I know I've competed so many times and I've lost sometimes. And to stand straight when you lose, it's not easy. To be a winner is easy.
Yes.
It's not easy because you work so much to become, but that moment is not difficult.
Right, I agree.
But the moment when everybody's watching you and you suck, at least in your own eyes, that is a hard moment. And something that I want to ask you, because when I see you now, you seem so loving and so confident in yourself. When did you start loving yourself?
Honestly, it took a while. It's when I started running again. And what happened for me is I ran my first marathon when I was 17. I read books and magazines and trained myself. So I was still in high school when I ran my first marathon and fell in love with the marathon. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever experienced. Because the school I went to was a small school and didn't have any sporting program at all. No sports. They had track and field day once a year. So that was something that I decided I wanted to do this for the rest of my life. And I did do another 4 marathons in the next 8 months. So by the time I was 18, I had done 5 marathons. But then I went to college, met my wife, we got married, we started a business, had children. And so I didn't run a marathon again for quite a long time. And when I was 31, I decided, okay, I want to go back and do a marathon again. Unfortunately, I didn't do it smart. I didn't go and train because I had this overconfidence that I've done 5 of these in the past. I can do another one without really putting the effort in. So what happened is when it came right up, and it was the LA Marathon, by the way, in 1994. When it came right up to the time to do the marathon, I did a couple long runs and my knees were really hurting. And when I showed up to the start line, I knew I wasn't in the shape I should have been in, but it's like, well, I committed to do it. I paid the injury fee, I'm going to do it. And I did not finish that marathon. That's the only marathon in my life I've never finished. I've now done over 200 marathons. Now, marathon is, as you're probably aware, it's 26.2 miles. And the typical finish rate, last year's finish rate of the Boston Marathon, which is one of the most popular marathons in the world, was 97%. So it's a pretty high finish rate. Most marathons have a 97, 98, 99% finish rate. And most people who don't finish, they end up dropping out at mile 18 or 20 or maybe even 22. So with that in mind, what mile do you think I dropped out in that marathon? Let's take a guess.
I think maybe the 8th?
3.
3.
You will probably never in your life meet another person who dropped out of a marathon at mile 3, just because my knees were hurting so bad and I was pushing, trying to run. And so I quit and went back to my car, kind of the walk of shame, because all these people are running towards the finish line. I'm running back to the start line. And I just felt just totally ashamed. And I'm only 31 and how can I not finish a marathon? And I talked to a guy a few weeks later, and he said, well, Ed, all those marathons you did as a teenager, maybe you did some damage to your knees. And he wasn't trying to in any way be a negative person or destroy my dreams, but he planted a seed in my head that I was ruined for marathons. I could never do marathons again. So it was 15 years before I successfully ran across another marathon finish line. 1994 to 2009. And what got me back into it was actually an adversity that turned out being something that worked in my favor. Back in 07, 08, I had done some real estate investing, and unfortunately I had over-leveraged myself, and it was back when the market was going up really fast and you can get loans very easily. Yeah. So I basically put my home equity on the line and went out and bought a number of pieces of real estate that I was going to rent or flip, and I got caught into that bad timing market and bad luck, but also bad decisions. I don't blame the market, I blame me not being smart and doing what I should have done, doing my proper homework and due diligence. Anyway, things turned around and I lost everything, lost my home, lost all my savings, trying to keep what I had, trying to pay these negative loans, and so I went into a state of depression. Unfortunately for me, one of the gifts my mother gave me was bipolar. Not the level she had. I'm bipolar 2, which is manageable even without medication. So, but I've had it my whole life, and so there's ups and downs, and I was in a really down depression time and decided that I would start walking just to deal with that, because I knew that exercise was good dealing with depression. So I started to walk a little bit and then started to run a little bit and found that my knees actually were not ruined. Now I'm 46 at this point. Remember at 31, I thought I was a has-been. And then I decided that I wanted to do a marathon. I went out and did the Pasadena Marathon and successfully completed that. Did a couple more within 2 months, and then right after that I did my first 100-mile race. But I never would have gotten back into doing marathons if it hadn't been that I had that situation that put me into that deep depression, and it was my way of dealing with the depression. So from that negative situation, that's how it all started. And then once the ball started rolling again, then it just took off from there.
Yeah. I think like working out, and maybe especially running, it's like the best psychologist in the world, right?
It is. And you'd asked me a question and I never quite answered that, and that is, when did I start loving myself? It really wasn't until I started running and finding success in running that I really started to feel like I was worthwhile. I had had so much negative programming as a child. I've been constantly told how I was a bedwetter, I was a pathological liar, I would hoard food because at one point, one of the foster homes I was raised in, basically they starved me. So I developed this habit of hoarding. I never developed a weight issue, surprisingly. I've always been at a good weight, never had an eating disorder. But so all those things I would do, I was a bad kid. And that's how my foster parents labeled me, as a bad kid. And so that's the programming that was in my head growing up. And even though I had a loving wife and had a successful business and things were going well for me, many kids that grow up in foster care, doesn't work out well for them. They end up in prison or end up dead. But I really didn't truly feel worthwhile until I started doing these races and having success with that and making friends in that world, that I started feeling like, I really can accomplish things. I'm not that little worthless child that I was made to feel I was. Even as an adult grown man, I still had that baggage that I kept with me for a long time. So it was really in the last 10 years, I would say, that I started to really truly love myself.
And thank you for sharing that, Ed. And also, it's interesting because life can come in many forms and it's never late. That's what I like so much with you, and why I wanted to share your stories. Like when you were older, like most people, they don't start something like this when they're 46. And this is your journey, which made you love yourself. And I think so many people out in the world have problems loving themselves, just because there's no passion. And maybe people have told you things, that you're not good enough, or that you are a bad kid, like you said, or that you're skinny or short or fat or whatever it might be. But those passions that we have, they can actually help us, making us complete, right? Because in that community, you're accepted, right?
I am.
Even though you're crazy, right?
Yes.
Having that jester.
Yes. And the other thing I have to say is, luckily for me, even though I had a very bad childhood as far as the environment I grew up in, it wasn't supportive, but I had enough people, even as a child, that came into my life from time to time that made me feel loved. Teachers especially. I remember my first grade teacher was the first one that really made me feel like I wasn't the dumb, bad kid. And then I had a teacher that I loved in 5th and 6th grade, Mr. Robinson. Mrs. Breedlow was my teacher in 1st grade. I was in special education, and doing a math test, she found that I actually had good mathematical abilities, and she went to the principal. She actually got me and said, "Eddie, you come with me right now." She took me by the hand to the principal's office and said, "This child does not belong in my classroom." It wasn't because she wanted to get rid of me, it's because she knew that I actually wasn't mentally challenged per se. I just didn't have the right environment to flourish. And she knew that I had what it took to be mainstreamed into the classroom. And she's the one that got me into my 1st grade regular classroom. And then when I went in the 5th and 6th grade, I had a teacher that was just phenomenal, Mr. Robinson. And he just really, he understood me. I was kind of a class clown because I wanted to get a lot of attention. I can look back on that now and understand that's why I did what I did. But luckily for me, because I was a good student as well, I actually did well in school, that many of the teachers would kind of give me a little bit of a pass. And I think also they knew my background. So I probably got away with more than maybe some other kids might have, or maybe more than I should have. But I think because of that, because they showed love to me, it showed me that I was a worthwhile individual. That's what kept me on the right track. I could have very easily gone over. I even got involved in some things as a teenager, doing some law-breaking things, and it could have gone either direction. But luckily there were enough people in my life that steered me in the right direction, and that also showed me true love and kindness, and they had no vested interest. It was just purely out of the kindness of wanting to see a kid succeed.
And is that why you stick around even after you finish? You want to help others?
That's a part of it. It really is important to me to help those who are struggling, because having gone through that, I know what that feels like, and I know how easy it can be to just give up. And I've had enough people tell me after a race, they will say, I meet people all the time that recognize me because I'm the jester. So because I'm the only one that runs 100-mile races in a costume, I'm very recognizable. Unfortunately, just because of the volume of people I come into, maybe I don't have the best memory techniques, but I don't even remember people, don't remember their faces or their names because I meet so many. But I will run into someone and they will say, I ran this race with you back 4 years ago in Arizona, and I was really, really struggling, and you came by with your cow whistle and your bell, and you just said a couple words like, hey, you're looking good, keep it up, see you at the finish line. And that was just enough to keep me going. And hearing things like that, it just gives me so much fulfillment, and so it gives me enough energy that I can pass on to others. And that's what I feel. It's my job, it's my responsibility now that I've accomplished a lot in the ultra running world. I'm an ambassador, but also I feel I have an obligation to pay that forward, to pay that back to the community.
I love that. And one thing that I've noticed, like, I don't know if can you show this? We can lift this up maybe.
Well, for the guys who are listening and not watching, I'm lifting up like 100 what's it called? Buckets?
Buckles. They're belt buckles that you get for finishing a 100-mile race.
You get these when you finish a 100-mile race. And one thing that's cool with these is that everyone has a story, right?
Yes, every single one of them, yes.
And that's something that I really like, because I have a couple of 100 medals and trophies and stuff like that. But sometimes I look at them when I go back to Sweden. They're in a room where my father has set them all up, and I think about, this is cool, but the coolest thing is the people I've met.
Yes.
That I would give. I can't replace that, because I've met so many people and we have shared so many moments, and that is incredible, right?
It is.
And I bet someone like you, how usually when you run a 100-mile race, how many hours usually?
The fastest one I've done, I completed in under 15 hours. The longest 100-mile race has taken me 36, but I don't do just 100-mile races. Actually, I do 100-mile and longer. The race I just did this last weekend was actually a 48-hour race, and I did 202.5 miles. So I do what's called multi-day races. So a 100-mile race, typically it'll take me around 20 to 24 hours, depending on factors such as how much elevation gain there is, if it's a difficult course, because some courses have a lot of trip hazards that you have to run through. Some are just flat and easy. So I'll do races that are multi-day, like a 2-day, a 3-day, a 6-day, a 10-day. I've done one 10-day race, and I'll do that same race again coming in April in New York. So the most I ran in a single race was the 10-day race. I did 715 miles. So my average, if you take all the 157 100-mile races I've done, and then divide that into the total mileage I've done in the races, it actually averages out to about 130 miles per race.
That's a long race.
A lot of them are just hundreds, but some are 2, 3, 4, then one that's 7.
You must like pain, Edwin.
You know what? I don't. No, I do not like pain. In fact, I am the biggest baby when it comes to my feet. I get the shoes with the biggest amount of cushion. I cannot go barefoot even outdoors. Any small little pebbles, like, ow. So no, I do not like pain. What I've learned though is I'm good at dealing with discomfort. I don't like pain because pain tells my body I need to do something different. So one of the things that have allowed me to do what I've done at the age I'm at and allow me to do it without getting injured, because I've done so much in a very, very short period of time. And I have a really fast recovery rate. It could be part of that genetics, could be mental, but I've learned that when I feel discomfort, I evaluate it, and is this something that's going to cause me harm, like true pain, like I'm getting an injury? And if that's the case, I have no problem stopping, or I'm not the kind of person who's going to be get through it no matter what, no matter if it kills you. No, because I want to run the next race. I don't want to get injured and then be out for 6 months. But I've also learned that adversity is what makes us stronger. So what allows me to do so well in the races is, at this point, I've encountered just about every single obstacle that you can encounter in a 100-mile race. And now I have that in my bag of tricks, so to speak, so that when something comes up, I can always look at it and go, well, yeah, this is bad, but it's not as bad as, and then I'll go back to another event that I did that was really difficult to get through. So I enjoy going to a 100-mile race because I know there's going to be a challenge. I look forward to the challenge. I look forward to figuring out how am I going to get through this, because the more challenges there are, I know that my competition has to deal with them, but I've dealt with more challenges than they have in 100-mile races. So that means it works in my favor. One of the things that I'm really, really good at is heat. I run in desert races and I do very well in them. And I've gotten to the point where people think I love running in heat. No, I like running in 45-degree temperatures where it's nice and cool, the same temperatures everybody wants to race in. But I've gotten to where I've developed my body to where I can deal with heat, and my mind, so that the harder it is, the better I do compared to my competition.
But so the brain, you must be very mentally strong. How do you deal with discomfort?
I believe that more than the physical aspects to get us to 100, it's the mind. And when I coach, I coach other athletes, and I focus probably more on their mental health than any other coach ever would, because I know it's all in your head. If you don't, for example, if you don't believe you can complete a 100-mile race, you're not going to complete a 100-mile race. So the first thing is getting to a point where you believe it can be done. And then once you believe it can be done, from that point on, it's a matter of mapping it out, having a plan, sticking to the plan, and then being resilient and tough enough to where when obstacles come up to get through them, and having a positive mindset. And what I've seen happen so many times, people will be in a race and things will go bad, which invariably does. In a marathon, there's what's called the wall. You usually hit a point where your glycogen levels are depleted, you're suffering physically and mentally, and that happens typically somewhere between mile 18 and 22. But you get through that wall, and then the finish line is up ahead, and you cross the finish line. In a 100-mile race, there's not one wall. There's 5, 6, 7 walls. You get through one, things get better. Then you hit another wall. So I found that when people hit that wall, when they focus on the negative aspects of it, they're just going to, it's like a little sliver that just festers and gets worse and worse and worse. Whereas if it's like a pebble of sand in an oyster shell, they turn it into a pearl, you can take that adversity and say, okay, it's bad, but what can I benefit from this? And it could be worse. And I'm suffering, this is a technique that I use, I'm suffering, but I know that guy's suffering too, and he's probably suffering worse than I am. So if I can talk to him and we can help each other, we're gonna get through this together. And it's a really strange phenomenon that I found in running 100-mile races. If you can partner up with somebody out on the course that's having a tough time, you become almost like a parent and you get them through, and then things change. And pretty soon you're the person who needs the extra boost, and they become like the parent. And I've never seen it happen yet where both people have the down at the same time. Because if you did, you'd both be telling each other, I'm through with this. How about you? Oh, are you kidding? Let's just quit. But somehow you get each other through. And where it really showed that to me was I did a race in 2014, I was going for the record for the most 100-mile races in a year. The record was 36, so I needed to do 37. So this was in late November. I had a successful year, didn't have any big issues, so this is race number 35. So I had to go a couple more to break that record. And if I didn't break that record at the end of the year, then that year's over. Then I have to start all over again the next year. So one thing I was really cautious about is always making sure I went into my next race healthy, uninjured. I didn't really care where I finished. I didn't need to win the race. I just needed to finish the race. So I'm doing this race. This is near Dallas. And it has 60 people that started, and it's a great little race. It's a fairly easy course, has 8-mile loops. So the first time we're going across this creek bed, this woman slips on the slippery rock and falls back, and she cracks her elbow. You can actually hear it hit the rock and cracks. It's a sickening sound. All right, she's now going to the emergency room. She's out. Well, that was a fear of mine that if I fall and do what she did, I'm out. And not only am I out for this race, I'm out for my world record. All this work I put in and this money and effort I put in for the last 11 months. So getting through each crossing is not so bad. There's these footbridges, and then it starts to rain. And when it rains, suddenly this dirt trail becomes slick, like snot slick. I mean, you just remember the old Keystone Cop, movies back in the 20s. They were like slip and then fall. That's how I'd feel. And I'd try and catch my footing and I'd fall. And every time I fell, the fear was, this could be the one. So I'd get up and tap myself and make sure everything's good. Okay. I fell more times in that one race than any other race. All my other races combined, I'm sure of it. And then we had footbridges across, and they were wood without any side railing. But with that mud, they became super slick. So I'd actually get on my hands and knees and crawl across them. Anyway, and then also the mud would stick to your shoe. So now it's like you're running with these like 5-pound or 10-pound cement shoes. All right, so eventually the rain stops and things start to get a little better. The next morning, they had a group of people that were coming to do the 50K. So I was doing the 100-mile race. And we're about maybe 2 or 3 hours away from the cutoff of the combined races. And this one gentleman comes up to me in the race as we're running along. He says, "I'm worried about, this is my first 50K. And the race director told us, how you're doing this world record and you've done all these 100-mile races. Do you think you're going to finish it within the cutoff time?" And I said, "Oh yeah, we have enough time. I think it's not a problem." He said, "Well, do you mind if I stick with you?" Anytime someone says, "Do you mind if I stick with you?" It's not a matter of, "Oh, okay." It's a matter of please, because I want company. I love having people with me because the miles just go by so much faster. So this was his first 50K. This is my 90th 100-mile race. And 50K is 31 miles. So it's like a third of the distance that I was doing. So he was really nervous. And we're going together and kind of help each other out, get into the different aid stations. And we had plenty of time to spare. Well, then the rains start up again. And they were right back to slipping and falling. And we had a 20-minute gap from, there was a cutoff time that we had to meet, and that gap is getting chewed up more and more. And we're to the way the racer just set it up is if you got to the last aid station at mile 97, which for him was mile 28, then you had as much time as you needed to get to the actual finish line. So she didn't want to cut anybody off at the finish line because they got in 1 minute too late. So we're getting to that last aid station, and it's really tight on time, and it doesn't look like maybe we can make it. And I told him, you go on ahead because I don't want to hold you back waiting for me. So he got through it, and there was one last footbridge you had to cross on my hands and knees, and got through there, and you had to be out of the aid station by the time the cutoff time was. So I got through and out there with less than a minute to spare. And I could hear their voices behind me, so I know there were people who didn't quite make it. So then it's like, whew, we made it. And all along the time that we had been spending together, the last few hours, I'd been kind of guiding him and helping him, and he was nervous and worried. Well, suddenly when we got through that, and now I've been running for close to 36 hours. It was a long, with no sleep. And he had got started that morning, so he had been on his feet for maybe 12 hours. But suddenly the tables turned, and this guy who was a novice doing his first 50K, and I was a world record holder. I'd done a world record at most marathons a few years back, and I'd done 31 in 1 year's time frame. So I already had some accolades to my name. Suddenly he became sort of my coach, my guide, my mentor, because I was in a mental state to where I was just really, having a tough time and just so tired and worn and exhausted. Oh, and I don't know if I mentioned, but the rain started up again and they got really heavy. And so if it hadn't been for him, I'm not sure I would have finished that race. Now that race started out with 60 people, 12 ended up finishing the 100 miles. So there was a DNF rate, did not finish, of 80%. That's not typical in a 100-mile race. Typically the DNF rate is around 20 to 30, sometimes 50%. And 8 out of 10 people not finishing is a really high, I don't want to call it a failure rate, but again, the did not finish rate. But again, for me, if it hadn't been for that one guy to help me, I don't know that I would have made it.
Yeah. And I love that because sometimes a mentor or a coach will come in a person you never expected from, right? And sometimes you can help someone that you never expect. That's why I always try to, whoever I meet, I try to meet them with a smile. And if I can do something to make someone else's day a little bit better, it's great, because tomorrow I might meet her. One thing that happened to me, I usually go and buy lunch or coffee at a place in Beverly Hills, and there's almost like once a week or twice a week I'll meet a lady that stands with a sign and she's hungry, and usually if I have some cash I will give it to her. But the interesting thing that happened to me that really made me think about my own life was one thing that happened last week. So when I go there, I looked in my pocket and I have $3. I said, okay, I'll give it to her. And when I came to her, she said, no, not you. You always give me money. And when she said that, I was like, I said, no, of course. But I was like, this person, to be, it takes a lot of guts to be able to stand there, because it means that you're putting yourself on your knees, right? So it's not good for your self-view to do something like that, right? And she wants to survive, of course, I understand that, and that's why I acknowledge that. But when she said that, it was something incredible, and I thought about my own life, like why can't I be like that sometimes, And that was something that a real cool lesson.
Well, I truly believe there's the old adage, when the student is ready, the master will appear. And I've seen that as a coach, as a mentor for runners and fellow speakers, that there are times when I've had coaches and mentors myself, and they came into my life at the right time, like my teachers that I told you about, Mrs. Breedlove and Mr. Robinson. And you never know what influence you can have on somebody. And to me, it's amazing that sometimes the simplest act of kindness, a kind word, a smile, one thing that I love doing, and it's kind of selfish, but it's a fun thing to do. I'm on the road a lot because of my work, and so my favorite fast food place is Del Taco. I love the veggie burritos and quick in and out. But the teller at the window, no one ever gives them money. If you go through Starbucks, the baristas they have that little canister, people put little tips in there. But so giving them $1, and because for me, I'm a senior now, I'm 55, so I get the senior discount. So I save $1 by getting the senior discount, so I just give it back to them. It's amazing how much joy one single dollar will bring them, because no one does that. No one gives the little drive-through teller, a tip. And little things like that you can do in your life. And it's the same thing with volunteering. When you volunteer, you get so much more than what you're giving. It's just amazing how that works.
Yeah, I think we have to respect all kind of work. We have to respect. And also, if you're in a job, you have to be proud of it. Mm-hmm. And even if you're not loving that job, at least I'm doing this now, and I'm gonna move my life forward.
Sure.
So I just have a couple of more questions to you. One thing that I want to ask you is if you could just say, like, if you can summarize your lessons from all these races and just give it in a couple of sentences to people that don't run, or they have something else. What would that lesson or those lessons be?
It's difficult to summarize it, but I think I can kind of encapsulate it in this way. Running a race is kind of metaphorical for life. It's not my goal to convince people to run a marathon. I think everybody should at some time in their life because it's an amazing experience, but statistically only 1 in 120 Americans will ever run a marathon. Statistically only 1 in 10,000 people will ever run a 100-mile race. So I'm never going to convince the world to run 100-mile races. But the lessons I've learned in a marathon and specifically in 100-mile races is no matter how bad things are, this too shall pass. And if you can just keep putting one foot forward, just one step. When we run 100-mile races, we don't go into it right from the start going, okay, I have 100 miles to go, and then we get through 1 mile. I have 99 miles to go. It's too much. Yeah. We think, all right, the next aid station is 6 miles down the road. And we go from aid station to aid station. We chunk it or break it into manageable pieces. And then sometimes just going from one aid station to the next is too much. So then it's like, well, just 1 mile. If I can just get through 1 mile. Sometimes the difficulty we're going through at the moment is so hard, physically, mentally, that it's just one step. And so if I get to those points, what I'll usually do is I'll do a countdown from 100 backwards. I'll just count my steps. You know, if I can get through 100 steps and focus on that, that puts my mind to focus on my numbers. I'm now counting. I'm not thinking about my adversity. Yeah. And by the time I get to the 1, typically it's like, okay, I'm feeling better now. And if I'm not, I'll start again at 100. But invariably, if you just keep moving forward, it's just relentless forward progress, no matter how slow it is. And this is something I coach to people all the time. It's not your pace, it's your pause or your stop. Stop is what kills you in a race. You can be walking super slow, but you will, as long as you're not missing cutoffs, because all races have cutoff times, but if you're moving, you'll get there. It's the ones who stop, many times, they don't get back up. We have a phrase, we say, beware the chair. Because if you come into an aid station, you sit down, sometimes you're not getting back up. It's just too hard. So most of us will come in and you get aid at the aid station, you get food and drink. We'll do it on our feet. And in fact, we'll walk out of the aid station eating and drinking, and then when we're feeling better, start running again. So keep moving, no matter how bad things seem. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And for a person who, in my lifetime, I've had times where I felt suicidal, and I look back on how dark it was, and I just can't believe that if I'd taken my life, all the things in life I would have missed out on. I have a 7-year-old granddaughter that it's just the love of my life. I never would have had that if 9 years ago, when I was going through that depression, if I'd have decided, because I had suicide ideations every single day. I would try and figure out, how can I kill myself in a way to where my wife I had a lot of life insurance, so my wife will get the life insurance, she'll be able to get rid of all this debt and have a good life, and she's a beautiful woman, she'll marry another man and have a good life. I felt like that's the best thing I could have done for my family, which was totally wrong thinking because my head was in the wrong place. But now I look back on it and it's like, wow, I was so close to throwing in the towel, but for whatever reason, just kept moving just a little bit forward. And that's a 100-mile race. That's life in general. That's everything we deal with.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. And I think we all go through hardship in different layers. And what you're saying, to not give up and to take that, you don't have to have the answer for the rest of your life or even tomorrow. Maybe just take that one next step. Right. And don't give up. Like the people that are watching and listening, don't give up. Like, we don't want you to give up, and you shouldn't want that either, because the sun is gonna come out again. Mm-hmm. It always does. And even if you can't see it now, looking back, you can always see it. Look at you now. You have your granddaughter and you have your kids.
Interesting you would say that sun, because many times we have what's called the witching hours in a 100-mile race, and it's from midnight to dusk. And that's one of the toughest times, because you're dealing with your inner demons and whatever you're dealing with out on the course, and it's cold and wet and lonely. but the sun will eventually come out, and when the sun comes out, it's like a whole new day. So a lot of times it's just, we know if we can just get to that first ray of sunlight coming up over the horizon, we know we got it made. Just got to get to the sunlight. Just keep moving until the sun comes up.
Yeah. 2 more questions, Edwin. So what's your next big goal you want to share with us?
I have multiple goals. That's what keeps me going. I get asked a lot of times, how can you do so many of these? Because I do an extreme number of them every year. I do typically, last year I did 28 100-mile races and a few marathons as well. And one year I did 41 100-mile races, which is, of course, the world record. But I always look forward to my next race because there's always a goal there. There's always memories to be made with friends. So one goal I have is to become, I'm now, you could say, the runningest 100-mile runner because I've ran more than anyone else. I want to be the winningest 100-mile runner. There are 2 people that are currently ahead of me. I've won 38 100-mile races. There's another American who just won a race 2 weeks ago. It was his 40th. And then there's a guy from Greece who's now retired from running who's ran 46. So I have 2 people ahead of me. And I'm on schedule, if things go according to plan, that I should be able to, by the end of the year, be at the top of that list. But I have another goal that to me is just more exciting, and it might sound crazy, but it's just a fun thing. And that is, I want to have the bragging rights of being the losingest 100-mile runner in the world. Now at this point, I've lost. When I say lost, it means I haven't won. So anything from second place on. And by the way, I have the world record for any number of tops. Like if you say, who's ran the most top 2 finishes in 100-mile race, the most top 3, top 4, top 5, every one of them I have, except for the most wins. That's the one I haven't got yet. But I also don't have the one for the most losses. So I have now lost 119 100-mile races. I need to lose another 22 to become the losingest 100-mile runner in the world. And to me, that's just such a fun goal. And every time like the race I just did this last weekend, I took second place. Now, I really wanted to win that race because I wanted to push that win rate up. But the great thing is, as I already told you, I broke another world record for most 100-mile races in a lifetime. I also broke the world record for most sub-30-hour hundreds, most sub-24-hour hundreds, and a whole lot of other ones. But I added to I now have the world record for most second place finishes. That was my 24th one. But now I have one more towards my losing goal.
I love this.
So it's all good. And you can find the good in everything.
I just think about all the other runners when they like have dinners or look at the record line. Your name is keep popping up everywhere. Must be very annoying for the okay, I can't be angry because that's a running jester. I like because you're really cementing your legacy here in the running world, which is kind of cool.
Well, you know what's great about our sport is I truly believe that we have the most supportive competitors you will find in any event. Every single runner out there is going through the same thing. So we want to win, but you will not find another competitor that will do anything to sabotage a fellow runner. Their crew will say, hey, what do you need? You need something? How can I help you? We're all out there to help each other because we're in this little world. The reality is, other than an opportunity like this, I don't get to talk about what I do. It's private because people don't understand in the outside world. If I say I have the world record for most 100-mile races, people would just, you run a 100-mile race? How many days does that take you? Or how many people, is it a relay? People just don't get it. And then when they hear that I've run 157, they just think I'm crazy. I would have thought someone who ran 157 100-mile races was crazy 10 years ago. So I understand that. So because we're such a small, teeny little community, it's extremely supportive. So even though we compete, I mean, the guy that beat me, he beat me by one lap. But he won fair and square. And although I would have liked to have won, but he ran a better race than I did. He deserved to win. He won fair and square. And that's the way our sport is. So if people see my name pop up, hopefully it'll inspire them, if nothing else, but also it'll help them know, well, hey, Ed, he earned that spot. They don't give away these buckles. You have to earn them. They don't give away first place, second place, any places. You have to earn them. Even even coming in DFL, which is it's dead, and we'll say frickin' last. There's another word they put in there, but we'll just say dead frickin' last. But that's even a cherished position because you were the last one to finish before the cutoff, because other people didn't make that cutoff time, and so that's an honored position as well.
No, hats off to you. I just want to say, like, doing these things and putting we just talked about the races. We haven't even talked about the preparations. It's like, this is crazy how much you really have to want it. And that's why we're here. And that's why we want to ask our guests, our listeners, how bad do you want it?
Sure.
Do you want something really bad? Then go freaking or go after it, that's what it is. And I have one last question to you, and it's something that I ask all my guests, and I think it's really important because we're all about sharing stories. But at the end of the day, we want to help the people that are listening and watching this to go after their dreams. So if you can tell them one thing that they can do right now after watching this, what would that be to get started?
Something that, again, from what I told you, my background, it was a hard thing for me to learn. But find a mentor. You can try to create the wheel yourself, or you can find someone who's already created it and can exponentially cut down that learning curve for you. Find a mentor, a coach, someone that can support you, but more importantly, someone who knows the pathway you need to take to get there and can steer you in the right direction, can hold you accountable, and can help you accomplish your goals. I would say that's the number one thing I find in making a dream come true, a goal come true, is mentors to help you in your path.
I love that. So I want to thank you, Edwin, for coming here today. It means the world for me, for you to share your story. I want to thank all of you that have watched this program for watching this. If you like this, share it with your friends, family. That's how we grow. And we want to help 10 million people in 10 years to achieve their dreams. And I can't do it myself, Ed can't do it himself, but we can do it together as a community. So let's go, guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.